Okay, here's numbers 26 through 31. Let me make sure my microphone's working. There we go. I can hear myself. Um, 11 falls between what two consecutive numbers? And actually, I tell you what, that should be the square root of 11. Apologize for that. And this should be the square root of 2. Well, just put it on the number line, guys, and put it in between your perfect square roots. Perfect square root of 9 on a number line is 3. And 4 times 4 is 16, so the square root of 16 is 4. Um, it's going to fall between 3 and 4. So what two consecutive numbers does it fall between? 3 and 4. What's the best estimate of square root of 2 without going over? Well, this usually helps right here. Square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 4 is 2. So that means the square root of 3 is right here, and the square root of 2 is right here. 1.5 is too big. I say let's try 1.4. And usually this shows up when you don't have a calculator. So 1.96, that's pretty good. If then you wanted to go through and try 1.45 times 1.45 to adjust your estimate, you certainly could. And what you would find at this point is that this would be just a little too big, because it'd be like 2.1 something. And so then you would say, well, let's try it like 1.42. 1.42 times 1.42. After you're done with that, quickly you find that that's a little too big, but just barely. So 1.41 would get you just under um, 2. And so really, if you're going to the nearest hundredth, I would say 1.41 would be your best answer at this point. Okay, but it's when you don't have a calculator, you just start working it out on your paper, and you almost do a guess and check. If you're too big, then you go a little bit lower. If you're lower than 2, then you try to get a little bit bigger without going over. What's the best estimate of square root of 80? Well, you know the square root of 81 is 9. So personally, I would start out at 8.9, and you know that 8.9 times itself, or 8.9 squared, after you work it out on your paper, would be 79.21. So then you might want to say, well, what about 8.95? What if I times that by itself? 8.95 squared um, would turn out to be 80.1. So that's just a little too big. So then maybe you try 80.94 squared. Or excuse me, 8.94 squared. Well, 8.94 squared is 79.9236. That's really close. I'd say the best estimate in this case would be 8.94. That is your best estimate, because 8.95 is just too big. 8.94 is 1/100th below that, and that's as far as I would expect you to be able to take it, really. 29, which is not rational. Remember, rational means turn into a fraction. If you can turn it into a fraction, then it's rational. Well, 5/6 is a fraction, so let's just put an R there for rational. How do I take 4 and turn it into a fraction? Put a 1 under it, so that's rational. Pi, that's irrational. But also just that way we can go through and see what 2.1 would be. This is the 10th spot, so that's the same as 2 and 1/10. And then to make it into a improper fraction, this would be 21/10. So again, we could take this decimal and make it into a fraction, and we know that pi is an irrational number. 30, which of the following is not rational? Well, we can take this and make it into a fraction, 6/10, which is the same as 3/5. Square root of 72 is an imperfect square root. It will not be a perfect integer like this, which we can turn into a fraction. And this becomes 5/10 because this is the 10th spot. And that's the same as 1/2. So fraction, fraction, fraction. This imperfect square root is always going to be an irrational number, so it's not rational. Moving on to number 31. This time, in standardized test level, do this. They'll get you going in one direction and they'll shift gears. Instead of saying which one's not rational, they'll say which one is not irrational. So let's see. This has an imperfect square root right here. And because that's going to be a decimal that goes on forever, even though it's divided by a rational number here, the 4, it's still going to be irrational because it's going to be a decimal that goes on forever without a pattern, so this is irrational. This square root of 36 is 6. Positive 6 or negative 6, how do you make those into a fraction? Put a 1 under it. So this is going to be our answer. This one is our rational number. Right here, though, I just want to show you this is an imperfect square root, and this is pi. And whenever you see an imperfect square root or pi involved, you know to go ahead and consider it irrational. So B is our answer. Actually, that's all that we've got for this go-around, and we can take a look at number 32 the next time.